Hi, welcome back to another episode of Coldstream Rod Shop. I'm Derek Fraser. In this week's video, we're going to do something different. We're going to be putting a 8.8 Ford rear end in a Model A chassis with a 4-link suspension. Someone locally who was watching our YouTube videos saw us do it in the 40 Plymouth and reached out to us to see if we would give them a hand and put it in for them. They're building a Model A sedan that's channeled over the frame, kind of a rat rod style. As you can see, they're going to be putting some huge tires in the back and some small ones in the front. If we spin around here, we can see they've already got the front end put in. It's a I-beam suspension with a leaf spring into it. So that's in right now. They just weren't entirely comfortable putting the rear end in. One of the challenges with the rear end is that it's a little different than what we did on the Plymouth. Because the frame is so narrow, it looks like we're going to have to reverse the way that the top bars go in. So on the Plymouth, the top bars actually were set up this way. So they came narrow on the pumpkin and it came out to the side of the frame. Right now, it doesn't look as though we can do it that way. So what I'm planning to do is actually reverse these, which you can do. It'll still hold the center, the rear end properly. So I have a piece of 1x2 tubing that potentially I'm going to use to connect those to it. But right now, what I'll have to do next, I'll be jacking the frame up, trying to get it at ride height, bring the rear end in, and start positioning it to set everything in place. We're doing this right now. As you can see behind me, the 5 window is just getting ready to go out. Should be leaving here in the next couple days or week or so. The project is pretty much wound up. So we're doing this little project in the interim over the next couple days. And anyways, follow along, see how we make out. And here's the first step of setting up the Model A frame to put the 4 links in the back of it. I have the frame set up right now. It's level on the jack stands. I have the rear end positioned exactly square with the front end to get the same wheelbase. In the back right now, I have 2 3/4 inches clearance between the tube and the rear axle or the rear cross member to allow for the shocks to mount. And right now, I'm just making sure and double checking everything is good to go. The pinion angle is set at 3 degrees on the rear axle, if I didn't say that already. So I'm in the basic stages of now mounting the lower bars. So I'm going to mount the lower bars on the rear end first, and then I'm going to go back and check everything again. I'm going to tack those in place. I've determined that basically this is approximately where the bracket is going to mount. There's 33 inches between here and the other side. So the lower shock mounts have to mount on the rear end exactly 33 inches apart. So you want the lower bars parallel, completely parallel on the rear end. So I'm going to tack those in place now. Then I'm going to go through the measurements again and double check everything is square. And then we'll go working on putting the top links in. So here we are. We have the lower control arms all tack welded in anyways. Both bars, as you can see, are parallel to each other. One thing I failed to mention a couple minutes ago was that these bars have to either be on the inside of the frame or the outside of the frame. In this case here, we don't have the room to put them on the outside, so we're kind of forced to put them on the inside. Ideally, these bars should be as wide as what you can make them within reason, just for better suspension control and whatnot. So like I said, right now the front mounts are tacked in. We're parallel to each other. I checked everything for square, up and down. I've got the rear shock mounts tacked in place. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to proceed to put the upper bars in place, but we've got to make a cross member for them to attach to. And I also kind of have to figure out where the drive shaft is. So I'm not sure yet whether we can use a straight bar going across, or I've got a drive shaft over in the other garage. I'm going to bring it over here and kind of just mock it in place and just make sure that I've got clearance for it. And then kind of lay out where I could put the upper control arms. Here are the upper four links, the two main arms tack welded in place. This part here actually had to go above, there we go, above the frame, just to keep the distance between here and the bar the same as what it is in the back. There's 9 inches between the top and the bottom nut, so I needed 9 inches between the center line and this and where it meets this bar. So you want these two bars parallel at ride height. So right now that's tacked in place. The other thing I've discovered is that with this drive shaft here, I'm going to have to actually make a drive shaft loop here, because the drive shaft, when I position it on the pinion there, pretty much touches this cross member. So what I'm going to do is I'll probably cut it right about there. I'll make a loop here right now so that the drive shaft, or more than likely a circle or a loop, so that the drive shaft can go through it. So don't really have to worry too much about these sitting above there. The owner would have had to make a large tunnel for his drive shaft anyways. So everything's tacked in place. Then around the back here, what I've done, like I did on the Plymouth video, I've got my pieces of wood that I kind of set as a mock-up. So these pieces of wood are 14 inches center to center, assuming we're using a 14-inch coilover shock. And then at 20 degrees, I made marks on the back of this cross member here where I'm going to drill holes and put the 5/8 holes through. I'm going to weld in a piece of steel tubing and then ream out the center, the 5/8 hole through the center, and that'll allow for the 14-inch shocks. So I'm going to carry on with that. We're making some good progress here. Once everything is kind of all, I guess, put together, rechecked and checked and double checked, then I'll do the finished welds on everything. So like I said, everything's going well. A little unorthodox for the upper control arms to be mounted this way, but it is okay. There's just not enough real estate to do it the reverse way. The upper shock mounts are all welded in place now. I drilled the hole out, put a piece of steel tubing in there, welded it in place, and then reamed the hole out with a 5/8 drill. So it's set up right now for 14-inch coilovers. With the 14-inch coilovers, it gives us 4 inches clearance at ride height. So the 14 inches is the condition where the shocks are loaded. When they're unloaded, like if we were to go over on the 40 Plymouth over there and measure those 14-inch shocks, it actually would be sprung up about another 2.5 to 3 inches, because there's really no load onto it, kind of thing. But what we want to do when we set these chassis up is set them up under the full load or condition. So right now, 14 inches, it sets up really well. With the 4 links in place, there is absolutely no movement in that. When I had the wood off of that, I was able to move the frame up and down, and it moves like it should. There's no binding. You know, the brackets are level on the axle. Everything's square, everything's parallel. Keep on checking it, kind of thing. Make sure everything is good. The one thing, I was talking to the owner though, we actually could go with a 12-inch shock if we wanted to, but by using a 12-inch shock, we'd have to use the upper hole down here. The one thing, by using the 14-inch shock in the lower hole, he still has the ability to raise it up if he really needs to. I think right now though, the 14-inch shock is actually good for him. Kind of once the front end is loaded down, it'll have a nice rake to it, kind of thing. But right now, where the front end it's fully sprung and there's no weight onto it, it looks it's a little bit of a rake. But I think this is going to be good for his setup. Next up, like I was saying, the one thing we have to do is make a loop that goes around the drive shaft. So what I'm going to do here next is I'm going to get some jack stands or something. I'll set this drive shaft down here so that the yoke more or less is positioned where the transmission is going to be. And then I'll move the drive shaft up and down to kind of determine how big of a loop I need to make. And then wherever that is, I'll add an inch to it for clearance. So more than likely, I'll make either a full loop or a half of a loop across the top, weld it in place, and then cut this section out and then clean the ends up. I may even actually put like a little gusset here on this bracket, just because we're putting a loop into it. I'm not sure yet. I'll play around with that in my head here and see how we make out, but we're almost done here. Once that's done, I'll basically take everything apart, flip the frame upside down, finish all the welds on the bottom, and then finish the welds on the rear end. Here is the drive shaft hoop. Decided just to make a nice square opening. Measured it so that when the drive shaft comes up 4 inches, completely clears it, which is more than what we need because the rear axle only comes up 4 inches. I just finished disassembling it and welding all the way around. I kind of like to weld all my brackets from both sides. Whenever I can get access to anything that I weld on a frame, if I can weld it from both sides, I weld it from both sides. Even if I got penetration from the other side, it's just, I don't know, maybe it's a little bit overkill, maybe it's a little excess, but everything's all welded up now. Even on the rear axle brackets, can't really see them all that well right now, but we've got her all welded up from both sides wherever I can get access to it. So essentially when I welded these brackets on the back of the axle, I alternated 180 degrees out. So welded like 3/4 of an inch on one side, flipped over, welded, and I kept on going so that the heat was even on both sides and it would minimize any kind of distortion. So that's all welded up now. I'm just going to drop the frame down here on the floor and start putting it back together, and we'll wrap this up for the gentleman, and with any luck here he'll come pick it up tonight and we'll be on to the next project. So here we are, have the cross member all welded. I've got a loop kind of going around it. I've allowed for 4 inches of the drive shaft to come up and down, and I still have clearance here. The pinion is slightly offset, but again, still have better part of an inch clearance here for the owner. Everything is all finished welded, inside, outside. I've checked the alignment again. Everything is square. The wheelbase is good, square to the corner. So basically the project is done. So that's kind of it, putting a 4-link in. This is kind of like a Model A, almost a Model T style frame. There's actually some more work coming into the shop in the coming weeks. We've got some more chassis work to do. We've been asked to do a 34 Ford frame, full assembly front and back. And then of course we're going to be working on a 32 Ford, going to be working on the 40 Plymouth. So not sure what we're going to have for a video next week, but it's going to be one of those 3 things. So tune in next week, see how we're doing, and please like, share, tag, and subscribe, and send me your comments. Everybody have a great week. Take care.